Hey folks, it's Haas from GNAT News. Today we're back at the Manchester Historical Society. We're going to be visiting with Sean. Sean has a new thing that was just donated to them that sounds really cool, and we're going to find out what it is. So here we go. All right, so Sean, what do we got today? Surprise us.
So Haas, we're going to start right here. Actually, this is a military register. This was printed in the wake of the Civil War, 1861, 1865. This was printed for veterans groups. And this is of Company E, 5th Vermont. This was a regiment that was raised, about 60 of the boys were actually from right here in Manchester. And this hung for many, many years at the Manchester Elementary School, and they gave it to us a few years ago. So it's been hanging here ever since.
Very cool, very cool.
But what I really wanted to talk about was there was one gentleman right down here at the bottom, George Fleming. And what I wanted to talk about was this exciting cache of letters that were donated by Charlotte Williams, who lives up here in Manchester and also down in Maryland. And one of her ancestors received a whole bunch of letters from her cousins who were serving as one of the Equinox Guards members of the Vermont Company E,
So
Vermont. You're
saying all these years, hidden away in someone's attic, were all these Civil War letters?
All these Civil War letters. It's amazing.
So there's stuff like this still, Sean, still hanging out all over America that's not already in historical societies?
Absolutely. And they come up all the time.
That's amazing.
And this, this is exciting because, we actually know.
Oh, these are it?
These are it.
Oh my
Just
God.
a portion of them. And these letters, a lot of these letters were actually written by members of the Cummings family. And the Cummings family had, it's quite a tragic story. There were 7 members of the family, 5 brothers, a cousin, and another first cousin, a brother-in-law actually. All of them went into the Battle of Savage Station in 1862, June 1862, and all but one died on the field. Henry came back to Manchester and died in 1867 as a result of his wounds. So what I wanted to do actually was, I wanted to read a letter from George Fleming.
George Fleming to who?
His cousin Alice. Turn this over, and you can see he would write. They would write front and back, and sometimes the censors would clip out little portions if they talked a little too much about where they were and what they were doing. And this particular letter was left intact.
You realize that one day the ability to write cursive may be a skill set. I mean, the ability to write and to read. And to read.
And I have to say, I learned how to write in cursive when I was in grammar school. And, thankfully I have these to read, but, I rarely see it because, everything's in electronic format these days.
Yeah.
So the letter was written April 27th, 1862, Camp in the Woods. Friend Alice, who was his cousin, I sat down to write a few lines to you to let you know that I am well at present and hope these few lines will find you the same. I have not heard from you in some time. I have been waiting to hear from you, but thought I would write a few more lines to see if you had forgotten me. We are close to the rebel forts. We expect an attack in a few days. We have had a small fight with the rebels. We are going to tear down the fort in a few days. I should like to have you write to me, if you please. I wrote to you on the 20th of March and have not heard from you since. So a lot of these letters, which is really interesting, what they do is they wanted letters. They wanted letters. They're, the laments of the heartbreak of what it was like to go pick up the mail and not have any letters. Yes. And then once in a while, the fact they would get 5 letters at once. And they would say it would be like, they're like died and gone to heaven. And a lot of it, they would write home and they would ask. They were boys, and they would write home saying, I should think the young ladies would be lonesome up there in Vermont. There are not many soldiers there now. I think I should like to be up there and enjoy the dances with you. I think the war will close this summer. This is in April 1862. We are in a good campground. It is about 1 mile to the rebel fort. We have been building breastworks about 85 rods from their fort. So a lot of they would talk a little bit about what they were doing, but it was always inquiring of what was happening at home. And in the end, as you can see right here, there were a lot of sayings that came up towards the end of the Civil War as ways of closing. And this saying, and I did some research on it, it says, "My pen is poor, my ink is black. If you can't read this, send it back." And he would write, I want to let you know how the Parker girls are getting along. Give my best respects to them and tell them to write to me, and I will answer as soon as I can get along. And he says, I don't think I can write much more this time, so please excuse me. Now, when he wrote this letter, 2 months later, he would die at Savage Station, and he was killed instantly. From the accounts I read, he was gut shot at the time, which was considered a mortal wound.
And we don't really know if he ever received a letter.
And well, there were multiple letters here. He did receive one more letter after this, where he did write to say that how excited he was to receive letters.
Because everything, we forget, everything took so long.
Weeks.
Weeks.
And sometimes, on the home front, people would receive letters after they received notice that their loved one had been killed or had gone missing.
And his grave?
His grave, he's actually buried in Virginia in an unmarked grave, as unfortunately a lot of, after Savage Station identification, they didn't wear dog tags back then. It wasn't until a little bit later in the war when soldiers would, they realized that if they were killed, and they would start actually writing their names and pinning pieces of paper on the inside of the uniforms in hopes they would be identified. And a lot of times what they would do, and in George Fleming's case, they actually they erected a cenotaph right outside the library here in Factory Point Cemetery.
What is a cenotaph?
A cenotaph is basically a memorial where the body's not there.
Are there a lot of those?
There are actually quite a few of them in Manchester, and a lot of them from the Civil War area, because the family wanted a place to come and mourn.
If I wanted to come down and see these, I could?
You could come down to see these, so you can make an appointment. The beautiful part is, these came to us and they were transcribed a number of years ago by a member of Charlotte's family.
Got it.
And I, in turn, took the original dot matrix printout that we had and had one of our volunteers transcribe it into, more modern Microsoft Word.
Got it.
So,
Sir Sean, thank you for spending some time with us.
Awesome. Glad you came to see me.